This thesis project investigates the use of music composition and creativity as a whole within the music classroom. In order to facilitate the music composition process, a software application to be used with younger students was created for this project. There is a strong necessity for creativity throughout many facets of our lives. We live in tumultuous times, where educators are preparing students for a world that is ever-changing. The importance of creativity is usually highly undervalued in education despite its necessity. Torrance developed creativity tasks to measure children's creativity. Children who did relatively well in these creativity tasks were much more likely to be successful adults. In fact, Jonathan Plucker of Indiana University found that success in these creativity tasks was 3 times more important than IQ in indicating success as an adult. Beyond just individual benefits for creativity, there are broad-reaching needs for creativity throughout our society. If people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Roosevelt, JFK, or Steve Jobs lacked the ability to think in new and different ways, we would not be where we are today. In the scientific world, we are facing some large problems, like global warming and pollution, that will need creative solutions. NASA's project, Classrooms of the Future, has already conducted studies into how to elicit this kind of thinking from students. In the business world, companies need innovative ideas to remain competitive. Significant time has been invested into finding ways for people to be inspired and creative in the workplace to keep this competitive edge. Creativity and innovation remains important enough that 1,500 CEOs identified creativity as the highest priority for identifying future leadership in a company. Ultimately, creativity has been found important enough that governmental bodies have sought to better promote creativity in their schools. England altered their curriculum in 2008 to better emphasize idea generation in the classroom. The European Union designated 2009 as the European Year of Creativity and Innovation, holding conferences on the neuroscience of creativity, hosting professional development for teachers, and creating more problem-solving based programs in schools. China as well as Japan are moving away from their older models of rote memorization to programs that challenge students to solve real-life problems. Guderian states that educating with multiple intelligences in mind can be done with applied creative thinking. In terms of Sternberg's theory of triarchic intelligence, there are 3 kinds of intelligence: analytical, practical, and creative. Only students with greater analytic intelligence excel in traditional instruction, whereas students in all 3 areas can benefit from problem-solving based curriculum. In a study conducted with students in 5th grade band, students who were given assignments that included a compositional or improvisational component were much more likely to be successful than students who were simply given traditional practice assignments. Ultimately, creating is a knowledge-building process. Students are much more likely to retain what they learn, as the results of this problem-solving process are likely to be more significant to the students. This belief is embodied in the Scottish educational system, where improvisation and composition informs and enhances performing and listening to music. According to Guderian, you can't do what you want to do, make music, unless you have the wherewithal to do so. The process of improvisation and composition moves through all parts of Bloom's taxonomy. During the process of composition, students are challenged to remember, understand, apply knowledge, analyze what they have created in terms of what they are seeking to do, evaluate how they met their goal, and ultimately create. Despite the many benefits for music composition and creativity as a whole, creativity is often undermined both in education and the business world. Researchers have noted a severe decline in creativity starting around 1990. Researchers are not entirely sure for the reason. However, at home, children are watching more television and playing more video games instead of engaging in creative play. At school, there is little room for creativity as the curriculum is increasingly strained for time due to standardized testing. There are means by which creativity can be nurtured. In order to consider how creativity can be cultivated, it is worth defining what constitutes creativity. Throughout the literature, there are several definitions, but the most concise is probably Bronson's definition. He states that creativity is the production of something original and useful. As far as teaching for creativity, some take the belief that creativity is merely an innate quality that can't be improved or changed. There is a certain truth to this. People have a certain predisposition for creative thinking. However, Bronson says, think of it like basketball. Being tall does help to be a pro basketball player, but the rest of us can still get quite good at the sport through practice. There are a handful of exercises that can train the mind. By practicing alternating divergent and convergent thinking, students practice the fundamental skills required for creative thinking. Divergent thinking can be exercised through the use of analogies and metaphors. During divergent thinking, students should be allowed to explore potentially unuseful or not quite suitable ideas. Teachers can model problem-solving techniques and ways to create in order to provide students with ideas on how to approach problems. Just like any skill, these thinking techniques should be practiced with repeated exposures over time. The divergent and convergent thinking processes are essential to the creative process. During the creative thinking process, someone focuses on the obvious facts and familiar solutions. The brain then enters the divergent thinking process, scanning for vaguely related memories. Then the brain switches to a convergent thinking process, focusing attention on pieces of information trying to form a thread of an idea. Finally, that idea is evaluated for value. There are several factors that play into the success of this process. The ability to abstract is essential to the creative process. It allows the brain to identify the concept and find meaningful thoughts and memories that relate to this thought or concept. This allows unique and interesting analogies in the creative thinking process. Creative thinking is nearly synonymous to problem solving. Music composition could also be considered a musical problem-solving process. For that reason, it is worth considering the creative process in terms of problem solving. One conceptualization of this process is the problem space, which starts with an initial state, the problem, and ends with the goal state, or simply the solution. All the steps in between are various intermediate positions within the problem space. This is not necessarily a direct process, and someone might need to take several steps back in order to take steps forward. As an example, during the music composition process, someone might decide that the form of a piece should be ABA form with the B section in the key of the dominant. As the composition develops, the composer decides that the end of the A section would flow nicely into the relative minor key, upending the original blueprint for the form. This theory brings up an important aspect to creative problem solving. In order to solve a problem, the problem must first be clarified from what might be a vague, ill-defined problem to the point of being a well-defined problem. So defining constraints provides a better sense of what the solution will look like. In a case study done with a music composition teacher and a student at a university, the student was greatly aided by the teachers asking of productive questions, which helped to better define the compositional problem that the student faced. It is worth noting that there is a similar neurological process concerning creativity despite the field. In a study conducted with college engineering majors asked to solve an engineering problem, and music majors asked to improvise, a similar process occurred within the brain. However, there are some aspects that are subject matter specific. In part, this is due to the fact that one discipline can't be evaluated based on the tenets of another discipline. As Dr. Ken Robinson states, there's no point applying the criteria of modern jazz to somebody who's trying to create a new souffle. Also, knowledge of subject matter is essential to creativity within that discipline. Csikszentmihalyi suggests that creative works are almost always the result of hard work as opposed to simply sparks of inspiration. Dr. Aul confirms this point of view in one of her studies, saying that the strongest predictor of compositional creativity was informal musical experiences. In a case study conducted by Barrett and Gromko concerning music composition pedagogy at the college level, apprenticeship dealt more with technical accuracy at the beginning before moving into higher-level concepts of unification and coherence in musical pieces. As Dr. Amabile states, knowledge of subject matter adds to the network of possible wanderings. With more knowledge comes a larger set of building blocks with which to build. The more music someone listens to, the more ideas and techniques someone has at their disposal in music composition. Creativity is often defined by uniquely combining different elements to form a new product. Framing a composition project by the combination of pieces can also serve as a good framework for students. An example of this might be giving directions for students that they should compose a piece that has a beginning, middle, and an end where the beginning and the end are the same. This provides a framework for students to create individual pieces and shows them one way in which those pieces can be assembled. Picking the right building blocks is important. Gick and Holyoake noted that it is difficult to create when given information or ideas that serve as a distractor. This distractor information hinders the recall of proper analogies. There are a few conceptualizations of the stages in the creative process. Graham Wallace's stages of composition include preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. Dewey and Wallace's thinking model, ORIENT, includes the following phases. O, where options are identified, R, which can stand for review, revision, or reflection, IE, which stands for interim evaluation, and NT, which stands for new thoughts. These stages imply, and other researchers say explicitly, that creators need time for ideas to incubate. Beyond just time, some students might need space in the literal and figurative sense. It is necessary to provide students freedom to create. Unplanned and unpredictable goals might arise from creation, and this should be allowed in order to encourage divergent thinking. However, there should be some direction to the process as well. As Dr. Amabile says, creativity thrives when managers let people decide how to climb a mountain. They needn't, however, let employees choose which one. So students should still be held accountable for fulfilling the parameters of an assignment, but given latitude for the way in which they do so. This freedom gives students a sense of ownership over this creative process. Beyond time and space, students need to be given the proper resources in order to create. Usually this means giving students the means to find a solution, but not giving them the solution itself. This gives students the means to move forward, but requires them to explore possible answers. Collaboration is an important aspect in the creative process as well. Even creators who work in isolation are influenced by the culture and creative works of others. Problem solving in groups leads to new means of approaching ideas as we learn from others. One researcher noted that creative projects created by friends are usually superior to those created by acquaintances, since communication is better. However, other research has shown that heterogeneous groups allow for different expertise and thinking styles. These two pieces of information might not necessarily be contradictory, but could conflict. There are some features of group dynamics that will play a significant role. Members should share excitement over the team's goal and have a willingness to help each other through hard times. Group members should value diversity of opinion in a room and recognize the unique skill set each member brings to the table. Being in a state of flow, where someone is fully focused on the task at hand, greatly improves creativity. In promoting a potential state of flow, the project should be challenging, but at the same time students should feel no worry of failure. Clear goals and feedback upon completion help move towards this state of flow. To that end, teachers should utilize peer mentoring, teacher support, and reflective discussion. A creative project should be intrinsically motivating. Dr. Amabile states, "A cash reward can't magically prompt people to find their work interesting if in their hearts they feel it is dull." She has found this aspect so important that she created the intrinsic motivation principle of creativity. So, finding the right kind of assignments for students is essential. Throughout the creative process, teacher support is essential. As much as possible, students should receive immediate praise for accomplishments and creativity. Teachers should encourage divergent thinking by finding ways to say yes as much as possible instead of denying students' ideas. Throughout this process, teachers should remain sensitive and nurturing, encouraging creativity and risk-taking. There are a handful of personality traits that have been shown to lead to greater creativity. In order to encourage creativity, these qualities should be encouraged in students wherever possible. Persistence, perseverance, willingness to change and grow, flexibility of thinking, approaching problems from many angles and using knowledge from different fields, tolerance for ambiguity, wide range of interests, and risk-taking. There are a couple theories and themes that apply specifically to creativity when used in music composition and technology. There are some dichotomies that must be balanced during the process of music composition. Instability provides interest, but stability through the use of a tonal center, formal structure, rhythm, or defined length of silence provides an anchor for listeners so that they have a context to perceive change. Sound and silence both occur naturally in our day-to-day lives and similarly need to be balanced in music. Variety is described by Leonard Mayer as when a musical thread is dropped in the course of a piece of music. Tension and release should be considered throughout the course of a song. Veronica Cohen had participants visualize this in music by moving responsively and showing the energy contours of music. Motion and stasis should also be considered. If someone perceives music as boring, it is usually because there is a perceived lack of motion. Technology can greatly aid in the creation of music. Technology has led to a democratization of music as individuals can use sophisticated software and technology to create music. Music creation no longer has to be created solely by record companies or large performing groups. Technology can be used to scaffold the composition process to meet students' needs as well. Technology aids in teaching concerning multiple intelligences. Cope and Kalantzis identified 5 modes of meaning: linguistic, visual, gestural, audio, and spatial. Modes can work together and are easily combined with the use of technology. For instance, a piece of software like Finale allows music notation to be visualized as well as played at the same time, providing a better learning experience for students. Research has also shown that computer software, if used properly, can accommodate all 3 triarchic strengths: analytical, practical, and creative. It is the goal of this project to capitalize on the strengths of technology to best assist students in the process of music composition. For the reasons mentioned previously, this project has several requirements. The application should provide adaptable means of composing. For the scope of this project, a sequencer was developed, as well as a music notation editor similar to one found in Finale or Sibelius. The software should be cross-platform. Students should be able to compose in the means that suits them best, and also teachers should be able to utilize the technology available at their disposal. So if a student wants to compose on a tablet on the floor, or if a teacher only has a computer lab to utilize, this software can target those situations. Similarly, the program has to be very interactive to provide good user feedback. For that reason, the software should be responsive to user interaction, visually interactive, and have audio playback that can easily adapt to changes made by the user. So for this project, several modules were needed. There is an audio component in charge of playback and dealing with changes to sounds being played. There is a graphics library in charge of animations and visualizations. A component was created to ease the process of creating a melody. The user draws a line on the screen, and the contour of that line is turned into a melody. There is a music notation module so that music can be edited with a similar interface to Finale or Sibelius. Also, there is a sequencer providing a similar interface to something like GarageBand. These requirements influence what technologies can be used to create the program. This project is resource intensive. Real-time audio processing and visually interactive applications use a lot of a computer's memory and processing resources. Also, this program has to be portable so that it can be accessed just as easily from a web page as it could be as an app on a tablet. To meet these needs, the Java programming language along with the gaming library Play-N were chosen. Java performs relatively well compared to other programming languages. It is also somewhat portable so that it can be used on web pages, laptops, or tablets. Gaming libraries provide a framework to access graphics. It also operates efficiently because of the typical needs of most games. Play-N in particular allows access to graphics and targets many device types. As a part of this program, there is an audio timeline that tracks when sounds need to be played and then plays them at the right time. This audio timeline needs to be reactive to change. For instance, if a user removes a sound during playback, the audio timeline needs to reflect that change and alter playback accordingly as soon as possible. There also has to be a high degree of accuracy for these notes. It is fairly noticeable when 2 sounds are even slightly out of sync. So the audio timeline is segmented typically into half-second amounts to meet these needs. During playback, all the sounds at the particular segment are considered. The playback mechanism accounts for the location of sound within the segment. For instance, a sound might start right at the beginning of a segment or midway into the segment. Then the audio is combined and sent to the speakers. While the audio is playing on the speakers, the next segment of audio is being determined. This audio playback can be done with a scheduled sound timeline. In this process, a timer is set for every piece of audio starting in a segment. When the timer goes off, the audio plays. The other means of combining audio is by taking the bytes of audio information from all the audio sources and combining them. The traditional way that audio data is encapsulated digitally is using pulse code modulation, otherwise known as PCM. As an example, audio CDs are encoded using PCM data. In PCM, the audio is time-sliced into samples. So a sample rate of 44,100 Hz, the typical sample rate for an audio CD, refers to 44,100 samples per second. Then the amplitude for each sample of audio is recorded. A stereo recording makes matters more difficult as there is the amplitude for the left channel and the amplitude for the right channel. During playback, the audio data from the sound files is converted into a series of amplitudes. Then the amplitudes for the sound files to be played at that time are added together. The sum of the amplitudes is then converted back into binary information that the speaker driver can understand. Form on a large scale consists of things like ABA, rondo, through composed, etc. Traditionally, sequencers have allowed for partitioning the music. For example, if someone were to create a piece in ABA form in a sequencer like GarageBand, the first and last sections would be the A section, and the middle section would be the B section. However, forms can be nested. For instance, an A section can contain a musical period, which can contain a phrase, which can in turn contain a question and an answer. Similarly, the A section of a rhythm changes standard can feature the rhythm section riff, the horn backups, and a guitar solo. We typically think of forms in these groupings when writing and listening to music, and this is the impetus behind this version of a sequencer. Someone can create a block representing the A section. That A section can contain blocks representing the phrases in that A section. Those phrases in turn can contain a block representing the call and a block representing the response, and so on and so forth. This ultimately allows the composer to make groupings and connections in the music that are more pertinent to the composer and potentially the listener as well. Music notation is an important component of this project, and there are a handful of music notation software libraries that already exist. For instance, there is a project called the Guido engine. This is a fairly popular music notation library, but did not have the portability needed for this project's requirements. VexFlow is another popular option, but it did not quite meet the requirements as well. For instance, it would be somewhat difficult to render a quarter note without rendering it on a music staff using VexFlow. In the context of some goals for this notation library, modularity was key. A quarter note should be able to be rendered without the context of a staff. Also, VexFlow was designed as music engraving software, not for manipulation similar to Finale or Sibelius, so the best option was to create a new software library for this purpose. The main idea behind the implementation of this music notation library was to treat music notation like a hierarchical layout. A score takes on the size of its systems. Systems take on the size of all measures in that system. A measure takes on the size of all its notes and rests. And finally, a note takes on the size of all its subcomponents like dots, note heads, accidentals, and articulations. However, there are several aspects of this layout that add additional layers of complexity. While music notation is hierarchical in a sense, it is also very much interrelated. For instance, while notes belong to a measure, notes are positioned so that they align vertically with other notes in different measures starting at the same time. These goals were met with some trials and some success. There are a handful of bugs that need to be fixed. In the sequencer, a new shape is automatically placed at the beginning of a song. This is somewhat counterintuitive. A user would expect to be able to place the block in a destination that the user chooses. Also, a user would expect that double-clicking on an item in a menu would select that item, but that was not the case. The viewport caused some confusion as well. Some testers didn't know that you could scroll the window because there were no scroll bars on the window. Also, the viewport should track the playback location. Right now, the playback location will go off screen and the user has to move the viewport to get to the right location. Some features need to be expanded. Before choosing a sound to add to the sequencer view, the user should be able to sample and test the sound. The Melody Creator provides a unique way to visualize and create a melody. However, once a melody is created, there is no means to edit it with the Melody Creator. One user suggested allowing for the editing of melodies within the Melody Creator after it is created. Also, one teacher suggested that there should be a means to make notation more accessible for younger students who are first learning how to read music notation. The application could adjust the octave of notes accordingly so that notes appear on the staff for the sake of readability. Some features need more options available to the user. Currently, the Melody Creator only allows for the creation of melodies in C major pentatonic. However, the Melody Creator could quite easily allow for melodies for any range of notes using any scale. Also, the Melody Creator determines melodies based on the closest eighth note right now. However, the Melody Creator could use any predetermined rhythm. For this prototype, the sequencer randomly chose a shape, color, and animation for any newly created block. However, the user could easily pick out these features for any block that is created. The music notation portion of the application could be more extensible if it allowed for multiple staves and clefs. One teacher suggested that if the project allowed for different clefs as well as instrument transpositions, students in band and orchestra could take advantage of this application. Even though there are some fixes and improvements needed in the software, there are some potential uses in the classroom. Since the Melody Creator relates high and low pitches to higher or lower places on the screen, this could be used with younger students to convey the idea of high and low pitch. One teacher suggested that this program could potentially be used to teach different instrument families. Since the sequencer uses different shapes to represent different sounds, the sequencer could very similarly represent different woodwind recordings with pictures of corresponding instruments. One possible different path for the software might be to move this closer to a music equivalent of interactive whiteboard software similar to Smart Notebook or Promethean's Active Inspire software. Finally, songs and melodies that are created in the application could be played by students on instruments. Students could play songs and melodies on Orff instruments, recorders, boom whackers, or other classroom instruments. With a little finessing of the application could also be used to create compositions that students who play an instrument in band or orchestra could play in class or practice at home. The application could provide a certain amount of scaffolding in the process, as the song could be played by the application itself. So, while there were some aspects of this project that were less polished, there is some tremendous potential for both the application as a whole, as well as the individual components to be used with students to aid in their creativity.